You're lying in bed right now, or maybe sitting, maybe procrastinating on something you were supposed to do 3 hours ago, and you're watching a YouTube video about dead people, and that's completely normal to you. But here's the thing, those dead people, they were also lying somewhere, staring at something above them, probably also procrastinating, except their something above them wasn't a ceiling with a water stain that vaguely looks like Italy. It was the entire sky, every single star, unfiltered, unpolluted, no screen brightness to compete with, and they had absolutely no idea what to do with their night either. Welcome to one of the most underrated questions in human history. What did ancient humans actually do when the sun went down? Not the kings, not the pharaohs, not the guys with the fancy hats who got written about in history books, the regular people, the ones who woke up, tried not to get eaten, found some food, and then waited for sunrise, for 8 to 12 hours of literal darkness. What happened in those hours? Because here's what nobody tells you in school. The night wasn't just the absence of the day. For most of human history, the night was its own world, its own culture, its own set of rules, and it shaped us biologically, psychologically, socially, in ways that are still running in the background of your brain right now, whether you like it or not. First, let's kill a myth. You've probably heard that ancient humans slept when it got dark and woke up when the sun rose. Like very inefficient solar panels. Sleep, wake, hunt, repeat. Simple, clean, efficient. That's wrong. And we know it's wrong because of one of the most fascinating studies ever conducted on human sleep. And it didn't happen in a lab. In 2015, a researcher named Jerome Siegel and his team studied 3 hunter-gatherer communities that still live without electricity. The Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, and the Tsimane in Bolivia. 3 groups, 3 different continents, 0 Netflix. The results broke every assumption researchers had. These groups did not sleep when it got dark. On average, they stayed awake for about 3 hours after sunset. They didn't wake up at sunrise either. They woke up before dawn, usually around an hour before the sun came up. And their total sleep time, roughly 6.5 hours, sometimes less. Modern sleep scientists will tell you that you need 8 hours and look mildly offended if you disagree. Ancient humans were apparently running on 6.5 and somehow building civilization. But more interesting than how long they slept was what they did before sleeping. Because those 3 hours after sunset, those weren't wasted hours, those weren't hours of staring blankly at a wall. Well, maybe occasionally, but not mostly. Those hours had a function, a deeply human function. They talked. Imagine it. Fire in the center, darkness pressing in from all sides. The sounds of whatever was out there, and there was always something out there, keeping you just alert enough to stay close to the group. And you talk. Anthropologists who have spent time with modern hunter-gatherer communities report something striking. The content of conversations changes dramatically between day and night. During the day, people talk about practical things. Tool, who went where, who needs to carry what tomorrow. It's logistics. It's the ancient equivalent of your work Slack channel. But at night around the fire, the conversations go somewhere else entirely. Stories come out. Myths, explanations for why the world works the way it does. Moral lessons wrapped in narratives about animals and spirits and heroes who made terrible decisions and paid for it. Jokes, genuinely. People made jokes. There's documented evidence of humor in some of the oldest oral traditions on Earth. The night, it turns out, was when humans became human. Because here's the thing about storytelling that we forget now that we have books and podcasts and 17 different streaming platforms. For most of human history, stories were the only technology you had for storing important information and passing it across generations. Want to teach a child not to go near the deep part of the river? You could explain the physics of currents, which is boring and they won't remember it. Or you could tell them about the creature that lives there, that pulls children under, that has been hungry for 100 years. They'll remember the creature. This is why every ancient culture on Earth independently developed mythology. Not because ancient people were naive and couldn't understand the real world, but because story was the most efficient compression algorithm ever invented for keeping people alive and keeping communities functional. And it happened at night, around the fire, in those 3 hours between sunset and sleep. Let's talk about fire for a second, because it doesn't get enough credit for how completely it rewired human existence. Fire was first controlled by humans roughly 1.5 to 2 million years ago, and the immediate benefits are obvious. Warmth, protection, cooked food, great stuff. Highly recommend. But the less obvious benefit was time. Before fire, when the sun went down, you went to sleep, or you got eaten. Those were more or less your options. The night belonged to nocturnal predators, things with better eyes than you, sharper hearing, no particular interest in your feelings about the whole situation. Fire changed the equation. Fire said, the night is negotiable now. Suddenly there were hours, real, usable hours that had never existed before. Hours that no predator wanted to come close to. Hours that were yours. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that fire didn't didn't just cook food, it cooked time itself. It extended the social day. It gave early humans a protected space in which to develop the behaviors that would eventually become culture. Music, language, ritual, art, the whole package. The fireplace is, in a very real sense, the first room humans ever sat in together. And those hours mattered so much that they shaped our biology. Human eyes are actually quite good at firelight. The warm frequencies, the flicker. There's research suggesting that firelight produces a specific kind of relaxed social alertness in human brains. Different from daylight, different from darkness. The brain reads firelight as safe zone. Lower your guard slightly. It's okay to talk. It's okay to connect. Which is why, by the way, candles at dinner still feel romantic and fluorescent overhead lighting feels like a doctor's office. Your brain is still running software that was written a million years ago, and that software has opinions about lighting. What about sleep itself? Was it different? Here's where things get genuinely strange. A historian named Roger E. Kirch spent decades researching historical sleep patterns across European history, diaries, court records, medical texts, literature, and he found something that nobody had thought to look for. For most of Western history up until the Industrial Revolution, people didn't sleep in one long block. They slept in two. First, sleep started shortly after dark and lasted a few hours. Then people woke up naturally, spent an hour or two in a state of quiet wakefulness, sometimes talking, sometimes praying, sometimes having sex, sometimes just lying there thinking, and then went back to sleep for a second block until morning. This segmented sleep was so normal, so unremarkable that people barely commented on it. It just was. The period in between was called the watch, or the wakeful hour, and it was considered a valuable time, a kind of natural meditative state that sat between sleeping and waking. Doctors of the time recommended it for prayer and reflection. Some people used it to check on their animals. Some people used it to visit their neighbors because their neighbors were also awake, and it was apparently fine to knock on someone's door at 1 a.m. in medieval Europe if you were just popping by. Then the Industrial Revolution happened. Artificial lighting made the night shorter. Work schedules made sleeping in 2 blocks impossible, and suddenly everyone was told they needed to sleep in one long stretch of 8 hours, and if they couldn't do that, something was wrong with them. Millions of people today wake up in the middle of the night and lie there anxious, convinced they have insomnia, convinced something is broken in their brain. And it's possible, genuinely possible, that their brain isn't broken at all. Their brain is just doing something it was designed to do for hundreds of thousands of years, and the modern world has no place for it anymore. Your 3 a.m. brain might not be a malfunction. It might be an heirloom. The night had rules. Here's something that surprises people. Ancient societies weren't anarchic after dark. The night wasn't a free-for-all where anything went because nobody could see you. If anything, the opposite was true. Night in ancient and pre-modern societies was heavily regulated by custom, by law, by serious social consequences. In ancient Rome, wheeled vehicles were banned from city streets during the day because of traffic, and only allowed in at night, which meant the city was genuinely loud and chaotic after dark, with the sound of carts on stone streets. Residents complained about losing sleep to the noise in ways that feel embarrassingly modern. There were night watchmen in almost every ancient city. In ancient Athens, there were formal night patrols. Babylon had them. Medieval European cities had them. The job wasn't glamorous. Walking around in the dark, carrying a torch, shouting the time every hour so people could track how the night was progressing. But they were considered essential because the night was also where danger lived. Not just animal danger, human danger. The darkness was where crimes happened, where enemies could move unseen, where the social order was most fragile. Many ancient legal systems had specific laws about nighttime behavior, and punishments for crimes committed at night were often harsher than for the same crimes committed in daylight. Roman law allowed a homeowner to kill a thief who came at night without legal consequences. The night was genuinely different, morally, legally, socially different, which is partly why it attracted so much supernatural significance. The dark was full of things. Every ancient culture, without exception, populated the night with beings. Not the same beings, every culture had its own specific roster of nighttime entities. But the pattern was universal. The dark was not empty. The dark was inhabited. Ancient Mesopotamia had Galu demons, creatures that served the underworld and moved through the night collecting souls. Babylonian protective spirits were specifically invoked at night to keep these things at bay. Ancient Egypt had its own nocturnal spirits and carefully calibrated beliefs about what happened during the 12 hours of darkness, mirroring the 12 hours of the day. The ancient Greeks had Nyx, night herself, as a primordial goddess, so powerful that even Zeus was afraid to upset her. Her children included death, sleep, dreams, and fate. Basically, the entire uncomfortable side of existence was filed under night's jurisdiction. And dreams were the night's most intense product, and ancient cultures took them with a seriousness that we've largely lost. In ancient Egypt, there were professional dream interpreters. It was a real job, a respected job. Temples had had designated sleeping areas, called incubation chambers, where people would go specifically to sleep and receive divine messages through dreams. If you needed an answer from a god, you didn't just pray and hope. You went to the temple, you performed the right rituals, you lay down in the special room, and you waited for the god to come to you in the night. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written, is full of prophetic dreams that are analyzed, interpreted, acted upon. Dreams weren't random neurological noise. Dreams were dispatches from somewhere else. The ancient Greeks had the oneiroi, spirits of dreams, including Morpheus, who could take human form in the dreams of kings. And they had a practice similar to Egyptian incubation, sleeping in sacred spaces to receive healing or guidance from divine sources through dreams. Even the Bible is saturated with nocturnal divine communication. Jacob wrestles something mysterious through the entire night. Joseph and Daniel become powerful precisely because they can interpret dreams. The night was the channel through which something larger than ordinary life communicated with humans. We've traded all of that for REM cycles and blue light blocking glasses, which is probably fine. Here's something worth knowing. Music likely emerged at night. Not definitively, not provably, but the evidence points that way. The oldest known musical instruments, bone flutes found at sites in Germany, dated to around 40,000 years ago, were found in contexts associated with social gatherings. The firelight social hours, the night hours. Rhythm is deeply connected to human neurological bonding. When people move or make sound in synchrony, their brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and their sense of connection to each other increases measurably. This is probably why every human culture that has ever been studied has music, and it's probably why music and ritual are so often intertwined. The night ceremony was almost universal in ancient cultures. The rituals that marked the most important moments, birth, death, the changing of seasons, the initiation of young people into adulthood, almost always involved the night, the darkness, the fire, and music. Why at night? Because the night demanded something from you. The darkness removed the ordinary visible world and replaced it with something more intense, more focused. Ritual needs a frame. The night provided one automatically. In ancient Greece, some of the most significant religious rites, the Eleusinian mysteries for instance, were nocturnal ceremonies. Participants were forbidden to describe what happened under penalty of death, and they apparently respected that rule because we still don't know exactly what the ceremonies involve. But we know they happened at night, we know they involved fire and music, and we know that the people who went through them often described the experience as transformative, life-changing, the most significant event of their existence. The night did something to people. It opened something. Whether you frame that spiritually, neurologically, or poetically, the evidence is consistent. Humans in the dark, together, with fire and sound, reliably had profound experiences. We need to talk about the sky because we've lost something there too. Ancient humans looked at a sky that most people alive today will never see. Before artificial lighting, before even candles at scale, the night sky over any location on Earth was staggering. The Milky Way wasn't a faint smear you saw on camping trips. It was a river of light so bright it cast shadows. It was there, every clear night, unavoidable, overwhelming, and people built entire systems of meaning around it. Ancient Mesopotamian astronomers tracked celestial cycles with extraordinary precision, not because they were bored, but because the stars were understood to be directly connected to events on Earth. Planets were gods. Their movements were communication. The night sky was the most important text that existed, and reading it was a serious profession with serious consequences if you got it wrong. Ancient Egyptian temple architecture was aligned with specific stars. The Great Pyramid's shafts point towards significant celestial positions. This wasn't coincidence or approximation. It was deliberate. It was expensive, and it was considered essential. The Polynesian navigators who crossed the Pacific, reaching islands separated by thousands of miles of open ocean, did so primarily at night, reading stars, ocean currents, and wave patterns in the dark. Their knowledge of the night sky was a survival technology. The Mayan calendar, one of the most sophisticated timekeeping systems ever developed, was built on centuries of naked-eye astronomical observation, mostly conducted at night. For ancient humans, looking up wasn't wonder. It was work. It was navigation. It was theology. It was agriculture. Knowing when to plant and when to harvest meant knowing the sky. The night was, in a very practical sense, the place where you learned when you were in time and where you were in space. We look at our phones for that now, which is efficient but considerably less cinematic. So what does this all mean for you? You're still here, which means one of two things. Either you find this genuinely fascinating, or you're in bed and you've committed to the bit at this point. Either way, let's land this thing. Here's what ancient human nights tell us. The night wasn't dead time. It wasn't a gap between useful days. It was its own category of human experience, and it was doing specific, vital things. Building social bonds through storytelling, transmitting cultural knowledge through narrative, processing experience through dreams, connecting with something larger through ritual, and reading the universe through the stars. Those 3 hours between sunset and sleep sleep that hunter-gatherers still use for conversation. They weren't arbitrary. They were the original social media, the original news cycle, the original therapy session, all at once, free of charge, with better lighting aesthetics. The segmented sleep, it gave people a daily pause between worlds, a quiet, dark hour to think without the pressure of the day, without the obligations of full waking life. A lot of people who discover this history feel a strange recognition. Oh, that's what that is. The supernatural beings that filled the ancient night, they weren't ignorance. They were the mind doing what minds do, taking the unknown and giving it shape, giving it a face, making the uncontrollable at least narratable. You can't negotiate with random statistical probability. You can, in some sense, negotiate with a spirit. You can perform the ritual, you can say the words, you can do your part. The need to make the unknown into a story is not a failure of intelligence. It is intelligence working with the tools available. There's a particular detail from the Hadza study that I haven't mentioned yet because I wanted to save it. The researchers noticed that in these communities without electricity, the young and the old almost never slept at the same time. Young adults were awake later, old people were asleep earlier, and old people woke up earlier. At almost any point during the night, at least one or two elders were awake. The researchers called this the night watch hypothesis. The idea is that in a world with real predators and real threats, a group that was never fully asleep at the same time had a survival advantage. Someone was always watching. The different sleep chronotypes, the night owls and the early birds, weren't random variation. They were a feature, a distributed watch system built into the biology of the group, which means your inability to sleep at the same time as everyone else might not be a personal failure or a disorder or something to fix with a supplement. It might be your specific job, the one your ancestors needed someone to do. The night was always shared, even in sleep. We've just forgotten that we're still doing it. And now, if you're watching this late at night, lying in the dark like every human who came before you, you're doing exactly what you were built to do. You're just doing it with Wi-Fi. Let me know in the comments what video you want me to make next. See you soon.